Hello and welcome back to the Exist Better YouTube channel. I wanted to do another layer of conversation around gaslighting, the experience of it, the coming out of it. So I have my video, you can scroll back, it's from maybe a couple months ago, and it's called, I think, Healing from Gaslighting, where you talked out of trusting your intuition. And this is, so if you're not really aware of what I'm talking about, definitely check that video out first. This is more relevant for some people than it is for others. I found it to be super relevant for myself, which is why I feel like it also has struck a chord with a lot of people. I got a lot of feedback on it. So, gaslighting is a hip thing to be talking about in psychology nowadays, and for good reason. It's a big experience. It's, people are experiencing it in different ways, in different situations, for different reasons, but there's always this emphasis on victim and perpetrator. So there's usually, in a lot of mainstream teachings about gaslighting, there's this misunderstanding or assumption that people are purposely gaslighting. Whenever someone's being gaslit, it's because there is a purposeful perpetrator who is gaslighting you, or because they are malicious and they want you to feel confused and detached from your truth or whatever. And frankly, this is almost never what is happening. That can happen. There are people who are purposely abusive, as we've said in the last video, but usually that's not happening at all. And so what this narrative does is it basically takes people who have wounding around gaslighting. So these are people who feel uncertain of themselves, like they can't speak their truth, like they can't be themselves, like they don't trust their own perceptions. That's really the main thing. They don't trust what they see, what they think, what they feel as true. They second guess it to the point where, not even to the point of skepticism, but to the point of actually it interrupts your life and you're not able to take actions and live in any sort of authoritative manner. So it's just interrupting your entire life, that this gaslighting, continuous wounding. And so it gets re-triggered every time someone questions you or anything. It's just re-triggered and re-triggered. And so with a lot of mainstream psychology teachings I've seen, what this narrative does by teaching people that they are being gaslit because people are mean or evil or purposely doing it, or trying to victimize you on purpose because they are a narcissist and you are a weak little codependent. What this narrative does, even though it is true in some instances, a lot of times it's not true, and it's not what's happening. What's happening, and this is pretty much the perspective of Teal Swan, it's what she teaches, what's happening is that people are occupying two different realities. So someone could be gaslighting you and be fully in their integrity and truth and be a good person while they're doing it. So in other words, if you have a certain perspective, you're convinced that that perspective is correct. Maybe you have lived experience with this thing and you know what you've experienced, and someone's coming in and telling you you're actually not correct, like you're probably confused, you're wrong, here's why. If they're doing that with the level of information that they have, at the level of consciousness that they're at, and especially if they think, if it is their intention to help you, they are not a perpetrator and you are not the victim of them, because they are doing the best. They're sharing the best information they have. And a lot of times it's what they're doing is they're trying to bring you out of confusion. What they see is that you're confused and they're trying to help you. And in their reality, That is quite literally what is happening. So from the perspective that they're in, the truths that they hold, the reality that they have constructed around themselves, they are literally doing the best that they can do in that situation. They are trying to be a good person and help you. The perspective of the person who is being gaslit or who feels gaslit, they are in this reality where nobody's safe. Sharing their ideas isn't safe. Having their feelings isn't safe. Because they've been continuously surrounded by people who don't know how to make them feel safe or included or heard or anything like that. They don't have experience with that. So it's a trauma. So people who've been chronically gaslit falsely assume that the people who continuously gaslight them are willfully ignorant. And while to some extent that can be argued, people who've been gaslit often, I see them taking this perspective that it is the responsibility of the people who make me feel gaslit to see that they're doing it, to learn what gaslighting is, to stop doing it, and then therefore they will stop being an abuser. I will stop being the victim of them, and then the world will be rainbows and sunshine. When I said that line at the beginning, let no fantasy hold my head up, that is a fantasy that is keeping you going and fueling you with hope that is not real. You should not be holding on to that fantasy, and it should not be the thing that is holding your head up. Why is that? Well, let's say you are on a boat, okay? Let's say you're on a boat that's sinking, and it's you and there's a dog and a baby, okay? So let's say you're so stressed out and you're so traumatized and you're so in pain, you can't think straight. You're in a constant state of panic because this boat is sinking and you don't know what to do. You don't feel that you have the resources to do anything about it. So you get this idea in your head that feels better. That let's say the dog and the baby are also on the boat and they keep making life harder for you. Like, they don't understand what's happening. They don't know the boat's sinking. And so they just keep antagonizing and making the situation worse. Now, this person is in so much pain and panic that in order to help themselves survive and feel like they can go on, they convince themselves that the baby and or the dog is going to learn what is happening and become so psychologically advanced that they're actually able to stop antagonizing that person and save them from the sinking ship. So in the moment that person convinces themselves of that, they convince themselves that, okay, the dog and the baby, they're going to change. They're going to change their ways. They're going to learn. They're going to develop. They're going to get into meditation. They're going to find out that they're being antagonistic and everything's going to be fine after that. We're going to plug up the holes in this ship and we're going to find a GPS. They're going to help me find where we're going. Whatever. It's kind of a weird metaphor. Just stay with me. So in that moment that they come up with that idea, that perception of that's what needs to happen, suddenly there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So they immediately experience relief, that they understand a little better what's happening and what could potentially help theoretically. And so there's instant relief and instant self-validation. So someone who's experienced chronic gaslighting they don't know self-validation. They don't know self-trust. They never have this sense that they're okay and that they're good and that what they're doing is right. And so for the person who's been gaslit, this idea that it's finally not me, it's finally on someone else, is the most immense sense of relief and satisfaction you can imagine. So what is the problem? The problem is the person is still on a sinking ship and they are still with a dog and a baby who cannot help them in any way, and the likelihood that they will develop to the extent that they can help them in the situation that they're in and save everyone and get this ship to not sink, the potential and possibility of that happening is basically zero, right? The potential of the dog and the baby, figuring all of this out and saving the day, it's a fantasy. The person who is, on this boat by themselves, they got no help, the boat's sinking. At some point, if they're going to survive, they're going to have to drop the fantasy and go back into being in pain. And the pain is, there's nobody here for me, that the pain of being gaslit is basically, I am completely alone. And to go up into that fantasy and feel a little bit of relief in that, like, oh, someone's gonna learn, they're gonna change, they're gonna help me. Maybe they should, like in real life, forget the metaphor for a second. In real life, maybe these people around you who are making you feel that way, maybe in theory they should change. Maybe it would help them to improve and learn and, but what people fail to realize is that a lot of these people who are really into psychology and trauma healing and learning about the nervous system and all that stuff, we're into this self-healing stuff because it is a privilege to be there. So someone who is constantly gaslighting other people and doesn't really understand that they're doing it, they don't have that capacity to understand what they're doing. Maybe they're a single mother that works, maybe they have 3 kids and they work a full-time job and they're just barely able to, pay rent. Now, from the perspective of the person who's being gaslit, that person who's doing the gaslighting should carve out all this time to learn about self-development, raise their consciousness, do all these things to make themselves better so that they stop being a gaslighter. Ideally, that would be great if they did that. And I'm not saying they can't, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm saying that the probability that they will, as, for example, as the single mother who works the full-time job and is struggling with all these things, just as an example, the likelihood, the probability that she's gonna do that is very small. And even if she does get on this self-growth path, the odds that she's going to quickly get to this point where she sees how she's affecting other people negatively, it's not going to happen anytime soon. I can tell you that from my experience with people. Here's the thing. Let no fantasy hold my head up. The person who's being gaslit and feels gaslit constantly, it is not actually the responsibility of people who are gaslighting you to stop gaslighting you. It is and it isn't. So, but we only care about you, your perspective. How are you going to get out of this state where you feel gaslit constantly? The way you're going to get out of that is you're going to let go of the fantasy that they're going to change. That's how you're going to get out of this. So it doesn't matter if they should change. It doesn't matter if they can change. It matters that they probably won't, because that's how people are right now. So then, when we acknowledge that, we let go of the fantasy, and we're saying, that's not going to keep me going anymore. So what will keep me going now? It's going to be responsibility. You're going to actually learn how to take responsibility in this situation where you are feeling like the victim. So this is dicey territory. Most people don't get to this point. Most people get way too offended and they want to turn the video off. So how do you take responsibility when you are in a situation where someone's doing something antagonistic to you, it seems as though you are just merely the victim of them, and you are at the whim of them changing. So you feeling better is determined by whether or not they change. That is codependence. That is over-dependency. And that is not taking responsibility for yourself. And this is the norm. This is what everyone is stuck in right now. So step 1, you acknowledge that you are in this deeply victim-y feeling state. You feel completely disempowered. You feel just victim, like everything's against you. You have no help. Basically, you're going to feel like this is not fair. That's going to be stage 1. And you're right that it's not fair that someone should be both a victim of something and in charge of changing it. That is not really fair. In theory, ideally, you should be getting help. You deserve help. You deserve to be validated instead of gaslit. All of these things are factual, but we're not going to let those fantasies hold our head up because they may not come. They may not be coming based on the level of consciousness other people around us are at. And they have their own traumatic reasons for being at that level of consciousness. If you need to gaslight someone else, you're probably not in the best state yourself. So we're going to have to spend some time just observing the victim in ourselves. Observing the victim, observing the inner protest. This isn't fair. I shouldn't have to take responsibility is probably going to be a big one. I should not be expected to. It can even go into this like entitlement, like I'm entitled to an apology, I'm entitled to this. And while on many levels that may be true, like you do deserve all of those things, you deserve someone to apologize if they hurt your feelings, you deserve to be validated instead of gaslit, all of these things. And the victim mentality is valid in that sense. It's correct. You do deserve all those things. That none of that should have happened to you. You didn't deserve it. So we're going to spend some time there, right? This is step 1 of taking responsibility. We're going to spend some time in that place of I can't not be reactive. So we're just watching ourselves react. The next phase is going to be we're going to get tired of being reactive and trying to convince other people that our reality is real. We're eventually going to get tired and we're going to start to see, this is something actually Jordan Peterson talks about, where there's the you and then there's something observing that you, right? So the consciousness is going to start to split. And there's going to be the you who's feeling victimized and reactive because you're being gaslit. And then there's going to be the you who's watching that happen. So, as Eckhart Tolle says, how can there be 2 of me? It's because you've got the ego and then you've got the higher consciousness. So at first, you're just going to identify with the pain, the reactivity, and that's going to be who you are. You see a lot of people in these states of gaslighting, of being chronically gaslit, and they're just reactive 24/7. They're just living in the pain of it 24/7. And it is ridiculous that the people around them don't see this and don't see that they just need to be validated and they could solve the whole thing by doing that. But for some reason, people I notice will not validate people who are being gaslit. It's like it doesn't even occur to them. But anyway, so taking responsibility for yourself, you'll spend some time in that reactive victim. Your consciousness, if you're really doing this process, your consciousness will start to split to where you have the person who's observing the victim and the victim part will still be there too. As you start to transition more into the observer part, you're going to see like, oh my gosh, this has happened 70 million times. Like I am in a pattern of being gaslit, and it'll start to get to the point where you're just seeing that everything in this is a choice. Like to feel gaslit is a choice, to To be reactive is a choice. To feel like a victim is a choice. You'll just start to see where it's like, this has happened to me so many times that I'm practically perpetuating it and creating it myself. You will gravitate toward people who are more likely to gaslight you. This is where people get really confused, because it's not that you were creating it the whole time. This is where gaslighting comes from. It's like people say, "Oh yeah, see? And so now you see that you were creating your problems all along." No, that's a gaslight. It's that the gaslit person has experienced gaslighting, and it becomes such a pattern, and no one rectifies it, both themselves or others, and so they start to actually participate in it without even realizing that they are now participating and creating it, as well as experiencing it and being a victim of it. You're a victim and you're a creator. You're doing both. So let no fantasy hold my head up is an invitation for the gaslit person to start to move out of victim and into recognizing the most likely potential. The most likely potential is the people who gaslight you are not going to develop and apologize and learn better because they're stuck in their own bullshit. So from there, we can start to disidentify with the victim. And this can't be rushed. This cannot be rushed. You need to continue to hold space for the person who is actually being victimized and acknowledge the reality of them so that you're not gaslighting yourself. That's super important, okay? So continuing to hold attention for the one who feels like the victim, because they are real. Do not gaslight yourself and say that you made this whole thing up. That's when you really go down this dark path of like agreeing with your own agreeing with the gaslighters. We don't want to do that. So there's the victim part, and then we start to get tired of it. So we start to disidentify, and it starts to be more fun and interesting to see how you are responsible for your own role in the whole thing. You want to do this for yourself. You don't really want to have someone else coming in and telling you this stuff. So this is what makes gaslighting so incredibly difficult, is because me saying this will be triggering for a certain group of people who are very, very identified with the victim. They'll say, you know, I'm gaslighting them and telling them it's their fault. So you want to be doing this process for yourself. You don't want someone else to be managing it, because you can be so in that reactive. You have this particular type of trauma where anyone coming in and saying anything about your situation is so fragile that you don't even necessarily want to go there. You might even need to like block people out for a while as you go through this process, like not necessarily asking other people's opinions, like what do I need to be doing better? How can I improve myself? Like, you want to be doing this process for yourself, because there's such a risk of being re-triggered into feeling gaslit. Someone could be telling you exactly the right thing to do, and you will feel so triggered and gaslit that you can't hear a word that they're saying and you can't implement it. So you want to be this for a lot of people, this has to be done by you, for you, in your own time, in your own way. So hopefully that makes some amount of sense. If you're someone who feels chronically misunderstood, misinterpreted, not heard, not considered, like not seen for your valid perspective, definitely consider what I've said in this video. Let no fantasy hold your head up. Look at what is really happening in reality so that you can play a role in that reality aside from victim. So that is all, and I will see you guys next week. Make sure to hit subscribe, and thank you for tuning in.